Okay, online English for legal studies. My name's David. As you can see, my colleague Emma isn't here, but she will appear in the videos. You will see her coming up in the videos. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to basically talk to you a little bit about what it is, the structure of it briefly. I'll then give you a bit of an overview of the approach, and then we'll look a little bit more detail about some of the materials, and then I'll look at some of the feedback. Some of you are wondering about BPP, by the way. BPP is a private university with a law school, a health school, a business school, and a school of foundation in English language studies. And the BPP stands for the 3 founding members. But please don't ask me their names, because I don't actually know off the top of my head, and that's being recorded. Right, okay. So a little bit about the course. So it's a result of a collab. In about January of last year, we were approached by the law school, and our law school said, look, we run the LLB online in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, and we've got about 60 students coming, and there's a partner college out there, and what they do is they deliver their face-to-face online. So they use Adobe Connect, and they take the face-to-face and they just put it online. So they have all their students sitting in one room online. And they said, well, look, what we need is some kind of English support for our students. As they do, they wouldn't say English for specific academic purposes or EAP. We need a bit of English to support them. So what do you need? Well, we need 2 terms, 10 weeks. And we decided to focus on reading and writing. Now, this is for 2 reasons. Partly because obviously it's much easier to do reading and writing online. And secondly, also because the focus of what LLB students need is then in terms of their reading and writing. They've got a whole chunk of material to read and write. So what did that look like over on a weekly course structure? Well, we developed 4 hours of self-directed learning. We then had this 1.5-hour live webinar. So every week we were able to give a 1.5-hour webinar to the students. And then in addition to that, there was 2 hours of forum activities. Originally, we had 2 times 1.5 hours of webinars running, because we thought different students would come at different times. However, what was happening is all the students were coming to both. So we just decided to reduce it down to 1. So a little bit of kind of what that looks like. We used Moodle as our basis, and now you'll get to hear Emma's voice.
This is how the English for Legal Studies module looks. So it's in Moodle, and at the top of the page here we've got the source book. So all of the texts that we use throughout the 2 terms are available for students to download and print off themselves. So then we have the content here. Let me just go into one of the weeks in order to show you how the week is structured. So everything is contained within book, so that's one of the tools in Moodle. And if I just click on this book, so we begin with the introduction, and then students can click through. So from the introduction it goes on to the video workshop, and this particular video workshop has a PDF as well for students to download in order to complete the activity. And then to finish the week, students will then go off and practice the skill with activities that have been made using Articulate Storyline.
So that gives you a little bit of the overview of what it like. What was quite interesting there for me was Emma being in the kind of screen on the side, which was actually something that I hadn't envisaged happening first of all, but actually it was quite nice to engage with the students. So then what approaches did we take? Well, our first approach was the teaching and learning cycle that we used. So my experience, I'd come from the OU and I developed EAP Online, which is their L185, a big online course that we used. And there we had used this cycle, yeah? So this cycle about what you do is you deconstruct a text. So we would give students a theme, a topic, setting the context. In our case, it was easy. We had the LLB, it was law. We chose contract law because actually that was their key module. They were doing this alongside there, so they already had that topic already there. We would give them a text, they would then deconstruct it. Yeah? So we would break it down, take them through it, identifying features within it. They then do some activities. We'd scaffold those activities, and then eventually they'd work and independently go off and write that bit of text. Now that could be either at a sentence level, paragraph, and in term 2 you'll see that it was to do with writing a problem question or an essay, which were the 2 main forms of writing they had to do. And then the second approach for us, which was important, was this community of inquiry model. For us, what was important is that we needed students to engage, because usually what tended to happen is students would just not do any of the materials, they wouldn't log on, they would just attend some of the webinars, and that would be it. Yeah? So we needed some way of engaging students and getting them to participate, getting them to be on. So we used this community inquiry model, and here what we tried to do, so you'll see there are 3 presences: cognitive, social and teaching. The cognitive one, what we tried to do is we tried to develop the curriculum so that we had a teaching presence. So we were talking to the students in some way, whether it was the use of you or the use of we. We then made it cognitively challenging, so we had some kind of critical thinking going on. But the key thing for us was the social presence, that bit where you develop a bit of rapport. You know, when you're in the classroom face to face, and you might make either a joke or you engage with the students, yeah, which is actually very difficult to do in an online environment. So what does it look like? Well, essentially there are 3, this is the weekly structure that we did. There are 3 kind of steps to that. There's an introduction, which was a Camtasia video, and then there's the video workshop, which is this teacher-fronted bit where we presented the material, and then the practice activities we did an articulate storyline. I don't know whether it's yet, what I will say is that when we started this project, the only person who'd had any online experience was myself. Yeah? So there were 3 of us involved in doing it. Yeah? We had no outside help, no kind of developers, no technologists, yeah, to help us to kind of design and develop the materials. Yeah? Plus we were at a university where online learning was relatively new. Yeah? So even just trying to find the people to actually help you and support you in getting this stuff developed. So there's an image of Emma presenting it. This is the introduction, the weekly outcomes. And here's an example of the video workshop. I'll just play this for you.
In the video workshop this week, we're going to look at why it's important for you as a student to read case reports. To do this, I'd like you to read a short extract, which you can download from the link below this screen, or alternatively, you can find this extract in your sourcebook. I'd like you to choose the best summary for this extract from the 3 options behind me on the screen. Pause the recording whilst you complete the activity, and then we'll go through the answers together.
She didn't cut her hair for the whole time. And then I'll give you an example of these articulate materials. So what you get to see here is, well, what you saw there was the Iraq structure, which is a common tool used in law. But for example, here's now a drag and drop activity. So if we think back to what the previous presentation, where they were talking about MOOCs and the limitation of the number of tools, actually in here, what was available were a wide range of tools. However, that's kind of plus and minus, because remember, as the writer, you don't really know what the tools are. Yeah? So you've got to learn what tools are actually available and then how to use them. So moving on to see whether it's improved engagement and performance. Well, I think we basically tried to use a whole range of different tools, yeah, in order to appeal to different learning styles. In terms of kind of feedback from the LLB program manager, well, actually, you know, they loved it. But Partly that was because they were, you know, they were lawyers, they were used to presenting material, massive chunks of material, we'll just stand there and deliver it, you know. For them this was suddenly, you know, interactive of some kind of, they hadn't quite seen anything like it within their own subject area. What was really key for me, and I think that I'm really pleased about, was the collaboration. You know, here we were, we'd set up a working relationship with the law school. We were having regular monthly meetings. They were reviewing the materials, and they were also then spreading the word of EAP across the university, which I always think is a very positive thing, because often we're left kind of on the periphery, out in kind of, you know, both physically and mentally, I kind of think. This here is an example of Powtoons. I don't know, are you familiar with Powtoons? No? Do you want me? Okay, so I'll show it. This is actually quite an easy tool to use and embed.
Using the internet for research.
Sorry,
how to select your sources. Let's get started. The internet is easy to access and appears to offer a wide range of information for less effort. However, it's important to remember that anyone can put anything on the internet, so you need to evaluate internet sources carefully. Lesson 1. How to spot the good from the bad.
What we were trying to do was get people engaged. We wanted them, it needed to be attractive. We need to make sure that they stayed online and were interested in participating. That actually was Emma's partner who did the voiceover on that. I mean, but it's just so time consuming to develop. This is quite interesting. So when we started, what you can see is this is Emma. So we used Adobe Connect. Are you familiar with Adobe Connect? You know Adobe Connect? Illuminate. It's just basically synchronous communication tool. Yeah? And what was happening is all of our students were coming into the partner college for the webinars. And during that webinar, they were handing round the keyboard in order to kind of interact and use the chat function. So although we'd anticipated they needed some digital literacy skills, and we built some in at the beginning of the course, and we'd given them a guide on developing your digital literacy skills, and we'd done a week 0, we hadn't anticipated that they would all be in this one room. However, after a period of time, then what happened is we did get them to eventually log in at home and in the various locations. And as you can see, this actually here is some kind of just informal chat, isn't it? Getting them to engage, that kind of building that kind of social presence. I mean, hi ma'am is quite typical of our DACA students. We looked at, so we did different types of feedback on it. We got quantitative feedback, we got some qualitative feedback in terms of focus groups. We also got feedback from the kind of program team. So as you can see, overall it was very positive, yeah? They all liked the interactivity, they all liked the fact that the materials were useful for their degree. I think what was key for me was that it was running in parallel. You know, students were studying their degree and they were doing this at the same time. And also the fact that you had these live webinars. Without the live webinars, I think it's very hard to get students to engage. Of course, you're going to get, what was happening is you get from your kind of senior management, they'll be turning around and saying, well, actually, that costs far too much money, you know, running those live webinars. However, without it, I think you'll possibly lose students. In terms of some of the kind of focus group data, some of the information we got back, well, I think what was interesting, I've divided them into white and red, partly because the white is basically techie stuff, and the red is a bit more about kind of learning their writing. You know, the fact that it was flexible. These students were coming into the centre to study. They had a partner college out there. They were coming into the centre to study, but actually they quite liked the idea of working from home, you know, of being able to log in. And it did develop their writing skills. And these are the students with them. So some of the lessons I think that we've probably learned in the process. First one is about getting the mix right, getting that balance of synchronous, asynchronous, and self-directed. How much do you need to put in? How do you find that balance? Training and development. I mean, at the beginning, we ran some training in using Adobe Connect. We did some training in using forums. I ran some training in writing the materials, but essentially it just was never enough. But there's never enough time and never enough money to get it done. Does technology constitute a barrier? Well, in Dhaka, I guess these students came into a partner college. They would have one computer room with 6 computers in. Could they log in at home? Most of these students were very wealthy, therefore it wasn't really a problem for them to access it. Getting the materials right, providing clear instructions, detailed feedback. The problem with that is it takes so much time writing that feedback and writing those, what you're used to doing in a face-to-face environment, well, all of that needs to be written down. And then the feedback, because no one is there, you've got to write it all in. And actually getting it right and writing it in just takes so much time. Technology is not the be-all and end-all, hence we had a printed source book which they could print off. We also said, well, you can use, you can still take notes with pen and paper. And I think my last point here is about Partner College helps build community. Emma went to Dhaka recently and just came back. And she was saying what she found is that the students like to go into the college. They actually liked going into the college. They had a social room there. They had a sense of community. So what we had been trying to do initially was to say, well, you can work from home, you can work anywhere. However, they liked going in, and that's what their community was being kind of built from. The student who didn't go into the college and worked from home was then slightly ostracized from that community. So that was quite an interesting thing. So it makes me wonder what we'll do next term. And finally, just to conclude, we tried to appeal to different learning styles using different tools. We didn't put in any wikis or anything like that. I think something we need to work on going forward is actually getting students to engage and participate more in the forums. What we've done is we've posted videos of ourselves to go into the forums. We've recorded ourselves and put that in. The scaffolded learning works well. And I think the idea of this kind of working with the LLB, who then reviewed all our materials, we then broke it up into, term 2 especially, we looked at responding to problem questions and essay writing. That idea of building the context, what we didn't need to do was work so much on working out what the kind of meaning of the texts were, because actually they were already doing that in their contract law module. So we could just take those texts and work with them, which actually saved so much time. We could then focus on using that Iraq method that they use. So that was quite useful. Thank you. Any questions?
I didn't quite get whether you provided feedback on their writing. Did you actually see any of their writing?
Yes, no, we did. So we provided feedback on their writing. That was either fed back via email, in the forum, or via the webinar. So via the live webinar, we did the group feedback, and then they got individual feedback in the forum and via email.
Follow on from that, really. What are their implications for how much staff time did you spend on delivering those? Was it reduced or similar to if it was run face-to-face?
It was similar. I mean, we had 1.5 hour live webinars, then we probably spent about another hour or so in the forum. So 2.5 hours per week, roughly.
Was there additional email or forum communication?
Yeah, I mean, there was additional admin and things to catch up and additional things. I mean, I would say you're probably looking at about a day a week to run it and do it. By the time, communicating with the program team, communicating with the students, with the partner college, wrapping everything up is probably a day a week.
How long would you say it took you to develop it? It's an enormous amount of work.
Well, we estimated, I mean, when I originally put the proposal together, I estimated that it would take about, an hour would take about 2 to 3 days of material. So here we've got 10 weeks, 4 hours, 40 hours, we've got 80 hours, 8 threes, 240 days, roughly. However, the reality is that it goes above and beyond, no matter how much time you give it. Because what you don't build in is, well, that didn't work, or we don't know quite what these tools do, or, you know, it's the writing, as I said earlier, the feedback, writing that feedback is just so hard, because it's trying to get it, you know, at least when you're speaking, you're able to backtrack, you say, don't you, and you kind of, you know, you reflect on it, then you can come back to it again, and you look at it and change. But when it's online, it's got to be more or less as perfect as can possibly be.
So how did you do that feedback? Was it sort of track changes or just...
Well, in the activities, the feedback came in the answer and the comments underneath, so that came in there. When students did their writing, well, that was slightly easier because you could then, you had a bit more time to think about it and feedback in the forum or in the webinars. But it's the feedback in the self-directed materials which is the hard bits to write.
Did you, I can see Julie said that, did you use any of the learning object creators?
Well, originally we were going to. Originally the plan was to use some of the learning object. And then when we started, I mean, I started off and I said, you know, my first comment to kind of the two writers, I mean, I essentially came up with the concept. I didn't really do much of the writing. I said to them, look, what you need to do is just limit what you're going to do, because actually you're not going to have the time. And I thought, well, we can use the Learning Object Creator tool, because actually that would be quite quick, quite fast. Not as fast as you anticipate it's going to be, but it's already there. The tool is already there. You can fill in the gaps, and then you can embed it into Moodle, and hey presto, suddenly you've got 20 learning objects or so, and it's done. And I saw those as quite, you know, transoperable. You could actually take them out, move them around, shift them around. They could be used, reused for something else, which senior management would obviously love, because, you know, it's all done. Yeah? However, what happened is we kind of, I guess, Emma is quite designery and techy, and she obviously wanted to make it tech, wanted to get involved in that designery techy side of things. So she wanted, and it's like, well, actually, if that's what's going to engage you and you're going to be involved and you want to use it, let's go ahead and use it. And actually, Articulate Storyline isn't so bad a tool to use. It's quite...
Is that, I don't know that, is it bought software?
Yeah. It's bought software, and the reason we have it at the university is because we have a professional education side who use Articulate Storyline. So we were able to use that license. What I haven't said, of course, is we had just made the transition to Moodle as a university. Now, Moodle in itself, well, it was just blank. I was used to seeing Moodle with stuff in, but we didn't even have anything in Moodle. I mean, it was still already a blank canvas. Okay, I'm getting a sign which is saying I must end now. Thank you. Thanks very much.